Welcome back to the channel. I'm on my way to California and Sea Otter as this video is being released. I'm dropping off the all-new Hightower 4 and I'll be picking up another bike for review. So stay tuned, subscribe, and click through those affiliate links in the description below if you need anything from Jensen, Rourke, and more. I've had this bike since December and had some fun times in Colorado, Utah, and then back here in Washington and Squamish. I got a lot of recommendations after my initial review and played around a fair bit. If you're looking for more on what's new with the Hightower 4, check out my initial video here. As I mentioned in the first video, I rode this bike on the steepest trail I'm aware of and down some of the techiest and gnarliest slabs here in the Pacific Northwest. It's also seen some of the best of Moab and Washington. So is this peak trail bike? Well, it certainly climbs as well as the old bike, especially on techie terrain, but it is heavier and slower. On the descent though, wow. Does it replace the Mega Tower? I don't think so, but many riders will find it to be enough. Let's get into how it descends and the fun stuff. First off, in the chunk. As I mentioned before, it does ride higher in its travel. While not the Bronson, it smooths things out much more than the old bike and has better rollover without feeling sluggish. Next on the steeps, this is where my opinions have evolved a bit. I still have a personal preference for the mullet setup, but this is probably the best dual 2.9er just behind that Evil Reckoning. And that bike has a bit more travel and heft to the fork. Bikes with similar travel and dual 29-inch wheels, it takes the cake. It takes a lot for the Hightower to not feel great on the steeps. Fortunately for me, that's exactly the type of terrain we have. Compared to the new Sentinel Setup 2.9, the Hightower is more composed and confident. Jumps are also just good. Not the best, but it did surprise me because I do feel it's better than the new Bronson. It's more lively and stays more true to the last generation bike than the new Bronson. That feeling of riding higher in its travel means it's quicker and more nimble on the trail. That also translates to cornering. It's as fun as we have come to expect from the last generation, but performs vastly better on off-camber and sweeping corners. I would give it a slight edge on the Bronson for how quick it changes direction and traction in those loose corners. We have to talk about climbing. After riding the new Orbea Occam, I feel like the benchmark has moved slightly. The Hightower has the energy of and efficiency of the new Sentinel, but the Occam just feels lighter without the sacrifice in traction you get on that Ripmo. The body position is very comfortable, and if you want to lower the bars, you certainly can, without sacrificing body position for all but the steepest descents. The body position is also surprisingly well weighted for switchbacks. At first, it seemed too upright, but you're not cramped like some bikes, and it whipped around switchbacks with the best of them. So let's talk about how this thing held up and what changes you could and I did make. Long-term reviews can be up to a year if I own and really like the bike. This isn't my bike, but I still was given a bit over 4 months. First off, I did put a heavier duty tire on the rear as well as different grips. I hate getting flats, and with a trip to Colorado and Utah, just wanted to minimize that issue. I've also had some hand and elbow issues that seem to come down to handlebars and grips. The handlebars are great, but the grips I just don't get along with. The last change I would make is at least a 200 rotor on the front for here and a 200 rotor in the rear if I was still in Colorado. I've been surprised by the stopping power of the Mavens, but in Squamish the lack of control was apparent and the heat was an issue in both Colorado and Utah. My last complaint is a bit about sizing. I've been able to run a 1-up 210 dropper on this and my last few Santa Cruz bikes, but the C-tube insertion does not allow me to fully insert the 1-up dropper, and again, while I've been able to make it work, it hasn't been easy and requires a lot of finesse when adjusting things. What about how it's held up? This is a place where Santa Cruz bikes generally tend to excel. There's a lot of talk about bearing wear, and while I love that this bike has a lifetime bearing replacement warranty, this just doesn't seem to be the issue it was in the past. I've talked about the creaking head tubes, but the taller head tube seems to better support the big fork and wheel and helps. Yes, I did still need to clean it, but not as often. This bike also seems no worse for wear. I downgraded the Bronson quality because the paint hasn't held up, as well as my Nomad or 5010, but the Hightower is still good. This bike again shows why I often reward Santa Cruz with a 5 out of 5 for quality. So how does it look in the loam library? A solid 44 puts it at the top of the list of similar bikes. It's improved over the previous version, and while not as light as that or the Occam, doesn't feel particularly heavy and makes climbing a breeze. Descending though, it does everything above average, and you'd be hard pressed to make an excuse for all but the gnarliest moves. Value dollar for dollar is only average, but once you account for Santa Cruz's support and warranty, I give it that extra point. When it comes to quality, it has everything a premium bike should, plus the extra 4 features like replaceable frame protectors and paint that holds up to some pretty harsh conditions. So let's talk comparisons. We'll start with the big one, how it compares to the new Bronson 5. On the trail, these bikes are more different than I could have imagined. They have the same travel, same fork, same build. I even looked up the shock tune and it's the same. However, the suspension feels different. The Hightower is lighter on its feet and quicker in every sense. Yes, I'd give it to the Bronson on chunk and in the steeps, but the Hightower takes the cake everywhere else. It's surprisingly more fun to jump and easier. I gave them the same score for corners, but the Hightower is a touch better both in tight corners and loose corners. Overall, the Hightower retains more of what the past Bronson and Hightower did so well. They are both better, but the Hightower expands equally while the Bronson has a prominent shift towards the downhill. When it comes to the new Transition Sentinel and Hightower, for me this was actually harder. I prefer the Sentinel over the Bronson, and for the Pacific Northwest, the MX Sentinel is great. But when you compare both 2.9ers, things get tricky. As a dual 2.9, I think I prefer the Hightower. Climbing wise, they almost couldn't be more similar. However, seated, the Hightower feels like it has more room, and for long days and switchbacks, that makes the difference. Descending, Transition stepped up their game with the Sentinel suspension, but so did Santa Cruz. There is less pedal feedback and less brake feedback with the Hightower. Again, setup 2.9, the Hightower feels more composed and neutral on the steeps. Your weight is back and lower. I rode the Hightower almost solely in the low setting for this reason. Jumping and cornering again, I am hard pressed to find any space between these bikes. It's nice that the Sentinel has the option to run mixed wheels, and I thought that may make the difference on jumps, but I don't think I can say. You get the bearing warranty with the Santa Cruz and the wheel options for the Transition. Check out both bikes, and honestly, whichever you like better, you can't go wrong. Nice! The last comparison I'll make, and the one I got multiple requests for, was how the new Hightower compares to the new Stumpjumper 15. I want to make the caveat that I have more time with the Hightower, and I'm comparing it to the more expensive and lighter Pro build. I mentioned lighter because while you expect the more expensive bike to be lighter, the Stumpy also rode lighter. First off, climbing. Similar to the Orbea Occam I just reviewed, you can immediately feel the lack of weight. But the Stumpjumper felt as though it got hung up on more technical climbs and had more unwanted movement. I attribute it to how steep some seat tubes have gotten. It just seems like bikes wallow less on the climbs. However, this was a bit of an issue on the Stumpy, and while the climb switch helped, the Occam and Hightower didn't need it. Overall, while heavier, the Hightower made the climb with less effort. Descending is another strong case for the Hightower. The short back end of the Specialized and maybe the Genie Shot got overwhelmed more at high speeds and just lacked the stiffness and stability of the Hightower. On steeps, the Stumpy's mixed wheels and short back end help. But as we already discussed, for a dual 2.9, the Hightower is nearly as good as the best mixed wheel bikes, and in this case, as good as the Stumpjumper 15. Through the rest of the descending categories, these bikes are in touch with each other. But the frame of the Hightower, or maybe the wheel set, as could be the case with the Pro build, made for a stiffer setup that added to the confidence on rocky trails and pushing into corners. Specialized has a great all-around bike on their hands, but overall the Hightower is just a touch better climbing and descending. So who's the Hightower for, and what are my final thoughts? Well, first off, if you want a dual 2.9er or are just tall, the Hightower is for you. I have a surprising amount of friends in that 6'4" or taller range, and the double XL is awesome. Especially if you have the steep terrain like we do around here, that tall head tube and high stack make for one of the best attack positions around. The Hightower does lean more confidence rather than getting into sideways fun. But like the old bike, it's predictable when you get it to slide, and the low center of gravity changes directions quickly and keeps the bike more nimble than I expected. If you own a Mega Tower or another big enduro bike and feel like it's just too much, then the new Hightower may be perfect. I said this before, there is still a place for the Mega Tower, but the gap between the two bikes is now closer than ever and will likely fit more people. I think we're still figuring out what peak trail bike is going to finally look like, and now we are back to terrain and expectations. The new Orbea Occam leans more fast and less gnarly, but I still wouldn't hesitate to ride it around here. The Hightower feels a touch slower on the climb, but it's that added mass that's reassuring when things truly get gnar. The Hightower is the all-mountain bike for riding without excuses. Thanks for watching. Spring is here and reviews are coming fast and furious. Subscribe so you don't miss out. If you're looking to pick up one of these, please click on the affiliate links in the description below. Jensen USA has this and more. There's no additional cost to you and it greatly helps the channel. Now get out there, go fast, and take chances. See you next week.